Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Watson. I'm here along with Michael Grumbine, and I'm not here with Dan Coates today. But
I was going to say I'm going to be playing the part of both Michael Grumbine and Dan Coates. It's like the Smeagol and Gollum from the
long-winded and briefly intense at the same time. But yeah, Dan's not here. I found out that May it turns out is a hard to schedule month for three people with kids and jobs and in-laws and families and everything like that. And so it's been hard to get Dan here. He did have a very important interview. He's a producer at the Babylon Bee, or the producer at the Babylon Bee. And I believe at this point, once this is released, their interview with Elon Musk will go up. And so that happened kind of suddenly, and so he was pulled away.
Second interview,
that's right. So he's not here, but I'm not going to begrudge him that opportunity and the importance of that too. So it's just the two of us today, and we can't really have our official 1-year anniversary show again. Sorry, everybody. I know it's been 2 weeks, and we'll get there. But we can't do an anniversary without Dan.
That's true. So it's too late. So we're going to have to go for the 2 years. So everyone wait 50 more weeks.
We'll get to it. We'll do it. And we can't finish the Silmarillion. We've got probably 3 more episodes of the Silmarillion to do. 2 more on the Rings of Power, or of the Rings of Power of the Third Age and the Rings of Power and the Third Age, and then also a recap one I think we'll do. And so I know that all you guys are going to want to hear us finish up the Silmarillion. You're going to want to hear us talk about all the upcoming things in the Rings of Power. But this is the shorter version. And to get the longer version, you guys do have to go to the onering.com/member. We're going to talk today about the Gollum game, but in our extended podcast, we're going to talk about the games both you and I, Michael, we played, and I think we played different ones mostly. And then talk about if we were given money, if somebody said, hey, you guys know Tolkien, what kind of game would you make in Middle-earth, in the world that Tolkien created? We're going to talk about that. I think we have a few good ideas. So if you want to listen to that, if you want to join our Discord chat, if you want to get a discount to our shop, we're going to be launching stuff right there until Teespring figures out what the error is that's happening on my account, and I can't do anything and upload every file. It comes up with an error, and I'm following the directions precisely. We're going to have some merch on there, and you'll see me wear it once I get it. And Dan and Michael, of course, will get them as well. So go to theonering.com/member, become a member. The first month is free. It's $4 a month after that. Or you can become a sponsor for $20 a month, and you get your name in bright white Allegreia SC letters. That's the font. Right there, Harrison, Adam, Lynn, and Shook. So thanks for that. And so moving forward then.
Very specific detail about the fonts. That's awesome.
Yes, there you go. I haven't memorized because I have to use it. Yeah, and so in lieu of that, what just released by the time you listen to this will be the new Gollum game by Daedalic, I think, Entertainment it's called. And I will be live streaming it, or I will have had live streamed it by the time this comes out, because I haven't yet as of this point in time. I think it will tomorrow.
You're not going to do it for the Friday live stream?
I don't know. Maybe I'll do it then too. We'll see. If it is, you guys can pop in and join me on the live stream and watch me play the game live and comment on how interesting it is. We'll see. I'm just playing it by ear. Like I said, May is a crazy scheduling month for me too. We've all got day jobs, and we're all appreciative of that, and we're all appreciate that we can get together when we can to do this, and we're trying our best to do the whole 1 week thing going on. But we are going to talk Gollum today because of that Gollum game. And we also talked a little bit about in our last live stream, with John Trent and John Carswell from the Tolkien Road, and Garrett, another Tolkien fan we've known for many, many years. We talked about Gollum and his character arc, and there was sort of a discussion about whether it's a redemptive arc or whether it's a destructive arc. And so Michael and I are going to take a little bit of time and talk about what it means to Tolkien, or what it meant to Tolkien, because he has a letter. This was letter 181, sent in 1956 to Michael Straight, the editor of the New Republic, I'm not sure. You can see it in the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien book. But let me read this through. This is a longer quote, so if you're listening, bear with us, and we'll kind of take thoughts, because I think this is his most insightful approach to how he views Gollum. Not so much in like, this is how I view Gollum, but it's almost like a, I don't know, would you call it a stream of consciousness a little bit? Because he's talking about what he thinks about Gollum in the same way that we were talking earlier, Michael, about how Gollum was a revealed character. That's how Tolkien writes. Characters are revealed to him as he writes. And I think even in these letters, his thoughts are revealed to him as he writes too. And like he muses, upon it. And this is what he gets. All right. So let me read this through.
Right. We could talk more about that later, but to set the context a little bit, just before you read it, Jonathan, sure. This that you're about to read is part of his answer to Michael Straight. Michael Straight asked 3 questions, and this one was about whether there was anything to be learned basically from the Gollum character. And Tolkien's answer actually starts with a reflection on the Lord's Prayer and the lead us not into temptation bit. And Tolkien's take is that what we're asking for there is that because there are situations we don't want to be in life where the temptation just never ends, and it will conquer us eventually. No matter how much natural gifts we have or strength we have, it's beyond us. And so we're asking our Lord to not lead us to those places. And so then he continues with what Jonathan's about to read.
Okay. This is about, halfway through the letter or so. And I'll read it all the way through. Not the whole letter, this paragraph. But at this point, the salvation of the world and Frodo's own salvation is achieved by his previous pity and forgiveness of injury. At any point, any prudent person would have told Frodo that Gollum would certainly betray him and could rob him in the end. To pity him, to forbear to kill him, was a piece of folly or a mystical belief in the ultimate value in itself of pity and generosity, even if disastrous in the world of time. He did rob him and injure him in the end, but by a grace, that last betrayal was at a precise juncture when the final evil deed was the most beneficial thing anyone could have done for Frodo. By a situation created by his forgiveness, he was saved himself and relieved of his burden. He was very justly accorded the highest honors, since it is clear that he and Sam never concealed the precise course of events. Into the ultimate judgment upon Gollum I would not care to inquire. This would be to investigate goddess privité, as the medieval said. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, that's gods. That's the old medieval spelling of gods, as in the G-O-D apostrophe S, and privité. It's actually usually spelled
P-R-Y, right? Or something like
it's
that?
Sometimes with Y. Now, of course, for those that don't know, the medieval ages were full of alternate spellings because there wasn't without the printing press to standardize things. People spell things different ways, but it essentially privité just means God's private counsels, God's inner counsels, the secret things that God knows that nobody else does.
Okay. So this would be to investigate the secret things that God knows, as the medieval said. Okay. Kind of injecting that into the line so we all understand it, because Michael is smarter than me. And he was
no, I just read other things. Michael wasted many years staring at medieval tomes.
Yeah, well, as the medievals say, if anybody's going to answer, it's going to be somebody with a degree in that. So, there you go. It's all coming to use now. Gollum was pitiable, but he ended in persistent wickedness, and the fact that this worked good was no credit to him. His marvelous courage and endurance, as great as Frodo and Sam's, or greater, being devoted to evil, was portentous, but not honorable. I'm afraid, whatever our beliefs, we have to face the fact that there are persons who yield to temptation, reject their chances of nobility or salvation, and appear to be damnable. Their damnability is not measurable in the terms of the macrocosm where it may work good. But we are all in the same boat, we who are all in the same boat must not usurp the judge, capital J. The domination of the ring was much too strong for the mean soul of Smeagol, but he would have never had to endure it if he had not become a mean sort of thief before it crossed his path. Need it ever have crossed his path? Need anything dangerous ever cross any of our paths? A kind of answer could be found in trying to imagine Gollum overcoming temptation. The story would have been quite different by temporizing, not fixing the still, not wholly corrupt Smeagol will towards good in the debate in the slag hole, he weakened himself for the final chance when dawning love of Frodo was too easily withered by the jealousy of Sam before Shelob's lair, and after that, he was lost. That's a lot to take in because it's this whole, and I divided it into two paragraphs here. So it is one long paragraph in the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. But yeah, like you said, Michael, like it starts with the salvation, and I think for me, I don't know, where do you want to start with this here? Is there something that stuck out before I jump in and start usurping everything? But what was the first thing that when you read this, you're like, this is how Tolkien views Gollum, or this is what I take away from this here after reading it and seeing this is how Tolkien approached Gollum?
You know, the first thing that this strikes me as is hilarious because did you pull this from the actual letter, the digital letter itself?
This is from the letter itself, yes.
Because I found a source which shows us the exact same thing, but it has a kind of a note from Tolkien about the it says at any point any prudent person would have told Frodo that Gollum would certainly betray him, and there's a note about the word certainly. But anyway, so maybe so I don't know if this is if there maybe is an interlineation or something, but one of the things that makes it clear here that Gollum in fact was about to be what could have been saved at that point, at that moment. And it was withered by the jealousy of Sam before Shelob. So that's the famous line that everyone likes from even the movies. The people that haven't read the books, the sneaking, although they put it in a different place in the movies, where Sam wakes up and calls Gollum a sneak, and Gollum uses it to mock himself and Sam and basically, but he corrupts. But that very moment where Gollum actually was lost, as Tolkien says here very clearly, I went back and reread that moment in the books, and it is one of the saddest moments, and it's a fantastic moment. I've been told by multiple sources that this, and I heard it first in a talk given a while ago, that this was on the manuscript of Lord of the Rings. There are actually dried tears. Like Tolkien cried when he was rereading this passage about Gollum looking at the sleeping Sam and Frodo, and a variety of people have said it, scholarly sources have said it. So I've never seen a manuscript, but apparently you can tell. and Tolkien was very sad. This moment was a pivot point. And the quote from that Two Towers moment was, "Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and gray, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously he touched Frodo's knee. But almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old, weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth. An old, starved, pitiable thing." So at this one moment, we see Gollum almost redeemed, where he's an old hobbit, and we see all the things he's been deprived of. So there is a possibility of redemption in Gollum. Mm-hmm. And then at that moment, Sam wakes up and says, "What are you doing?" And because he sees it, Gollum pawing at Frodo, when in fact it's this caress, this familial love. It's interesting because this never would have happened with Gollum if it was any other of the other members of the Fellowship other than the hobbits, because Gollum is, of course, a former hobbit, mm-hmm. or an ancestor of hobbits, if you want to think of it that way. And so it's a really fascinating turn that Tolkien is taking here. There's a lot of ways we can go with it from here, but go ahead, Jonathan.
The way let's start with kind of where the characters to Tolkien are not like, Tolkien doesn't look at them at his creation. It's like he discovered them as he mm-hmm. wrote, right? And so all the writing around Gollum is I don't think Gollum would have ever done this, or if Gollum had done this here, then the course of actions would have been different. But he never writes it like as if I actually wrote it, and so we need to understand, like, I don't think Tolkien, like the way Tolkien looks at it, like there was no other way for this character to be created. Like it was not possible because he discovered them, and they are part of the universe. You know, he spoke them into creation, I guess you could say, as a sub-creator. But it's not like he would go back and be like, you know, he's not going to retcon anybody to be to have a different gender, perhaps, or a different preference.
Right. But there is this interesting air of unknowing where he, as you said, Jonathan, he's discovering his characters. And it actually reminds me a little bit of having reread the Silmarillion, how sometimes we get these kind of flashbacks back to Valinor in moments of crisis or in moments of pivot anyway. They're the Valar sitting there and they're wondering what's going to happen and what Iluvatar's will is.
Yeah.
And sometimes they go try to figure it out, like Manwë tries to connect with Iluvatar. Sometimes they're just mysterious. Like, we have no idea what's going on here and what's supposed to happen. Except Mandos, who he just keeps his mouth shut and never says much. But even there are spots in the future that he can't see that have to do with, especially with the Min. And so, anyway, there is this. Tolkien has built into his secondary world an unknowability in his characters. There's this air of freedom of his character, which is even free from the pen of the author almost. Tolkien isn't. Tolkien's not controlling Gollum. Tolkien is discovering Gollum through his pen.
Yeah, I think Tolkien, and you said that Tolkien was most moved by this scene, right? Like there were tears on the manuscript. Mm-hmm. And it's the love that Gollum has for Frodo that I think drives him to that. Meaning that Gollum...
Agreed.
There is a discussion whether Gollum stayed with the hobbits, with Sam and Frodo, because of the ring only, or was it the love of that Frodo, or Frodo's understanding of Gollum? That understanding gave him an appreciation, or even maybe a little bit of love, like like pitiable love, right? Like he knows what he was going through, and so that, you know, it's like being a president. You're the only other person in the world who understands me. Like I'm the only other person in the world who could understand him, and I think that love is what. It's an interesting thing. I've never thought about it in these strict terms, and I came across this other. Strict terms is not, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but in these particular ways of like Gollum loves Frodo and Frodo kind of loves Gollum, right? In that sense that Tolkien had when World War I, of people who are going through the most horrible things together, since nobody else has experienced this, our experiences draw us together.
Look, it's an empathy, right? They understand each other. They have this emotional connection because they both have this terrible draw to the ring, and they've both been ring bearers. The one ring bearer.
Yeah, and so there's this other quote that Tolkien wrote in letter 245 to Rona Beare, and this is about him thinking about this point. In all his quotes about Gollum, I think he muses on this in his letters like 4 or 5 times. That's how important it was to him. I found at least 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. All right. So let me read this point too. This is in the middle of a letter, but you'll get it as I read to it. This is due, of course, to the logic of the story, meaning where they are and how Sam acted towards Frodo or towards Gollum in speaking.
Calling him a sneak.
Calling him a sneak, yeah. Sam could hardly have acted differently. He did reach the point of pity at last, but for the good of Gollum, too late. If Sam had reached that point of pity, what could then have happened? And this is where Tolkien, right? He's like, this isn't what happened, but I mean, maybe this would have happened, but this isn't what happened because I discovered, like, this is the discovery that I made, and there's nothing that could change that. But what could have happened if Sam had spoken, had pitied Gollum and wasn't there to call him a sneak? The course of the entry into Mordor and the struggle to reach Mount Doom would have been different, and so would the ending. So if Sam had reached pity for Gollum, just that one word, sneak, that one scene, it would have changed the entire ending of the story. That's That's big. The interest would have shifted to Gollum, I think, and the battle that would have gone on between his repentance and his new love on one side and the ring. Though the love would have been strengthened daily, it could not have wrested the mastery from the ring. I think that in some queer, twisted, and pitiable way, Gollum would have tried, not maybe with conscious design, to satisfy both the mastery of the ring, his desire for it, and the love that he had for Frodo. He wanted to satisfy both. Certainly at some point, not long before the end, he would have stolen the ring or taken it by violence, as he does in the actual tale. But possession satisfied possession of the ring. I think he would then, this is crazy, I think he would then have sacrificed himself for Frodo's sake and have voluntarily cast himself into the fiery abyss. That's crazy. That he thinks that just the love that he had for Frodo, and I think the empathy, the empathetic love that Frodo had for Gollum would have been enough for him to sacrifice himself for Frodo's sake and cast himself into the fiery abyss.
Well, and because with the ring, everything's taken to 11, right? So if you're able to, there's this powerful scene. Let's talk about another character tempted by the ring. You look at the scene with Galadriel in Lothlorien, and Galadriel's tempted by the ring. She in passing her test, she's sort of consumed by the moment and talks about what she would be like if she took the ring. I don't have the quote in front of me, but basically it's a queen. All would love me in despair. A queen, terrible and beautiful, and would have, be both dark and irresistible at the same time to all around. And so there's this place that the ring draws everyone into, which is almost a place of extremes. It's only black or white. And I think what Tolkien might be trying to say there is, in the event that Gollum's love for Frodo, as he experienced over his travels, because remember, all Gollum was trying to do before he met Frodo and Sam and was captured by them, all he was trying to do was kill them and take the ring. Mm-hmm. So he was following them in order to kill them and take the ring. But then from the Dead Marshes, or technically Emin Moil, through the Dead Marshes, through Mordor, through Ithilien, into Mordor, up Cirith Ungol, there's this battle going on where clearly Tolkien's telling us Gollum, in fact, develops a kind of devotion to Frodo. Well, he's telling us that moment right before the sneak line from Sam was the moment that Gollum could have actually repented. And if he had, then a new love would have grown up, and that devotion to Frodo would have become a real love. And we see that one of the things the hobbits are really good at, all hobbits, including 500-year-old hobbits like Gollum, are good at, is they're very devoted to each other, and they seem to quite easily sort of sacrifice themselves, or be willing to sacrifice themselves for other hobbits, especially. Like, they have this devotion to each other and this great love. Their sense of humor, their love of all things similar, but there's this great quality about them. So I think he's talking about how Gollum could have passed back into that. Now, the reason I'm sort of drawing this out is because I think this is really important when looking at what we're going to talk about a little later, which is this game that's coming out, because I'm a gamer. I've gamed my whole life, both board games, strategy games, role-playing games, video games, and I have thoughts about a game like the Gollum game and Lord of the Rings games in general, but I like what Tolkien did here, because he showed us that things weren't set, things could have turned out differently. But I love that you found this, Jonathan, because I had totally forgotten about this quote and how Tolkien basically reimagines a new ending to his book, which is kind of cool.
What do we make of the whole, let's talk about the whole redemptive versus destructive arc. It's we talked about it a little bit on our live stream last week, and I think it deserves maybe a little bit more pursuit, because Tolkien makes clear that in the end what he did was a good in the macro. In the micro, right, it was not a good, like the violence, the stealing, the biting off of a finger. But and even here he writes their damnability, right? Let me start earlier. I'm afraid whatever our beliefs, we have to face the fact that there are persons who yield to temptation, reject their chances of nobility or salvation, and appear to be, quote, damnable. Their, quote, damnability is not measurable in the terms of the macrocosm where it may work good, but we who are all in the same boat must not usurp the judge. I mean, is it a rephrasing in a sense of like all things work together for the good for those who love him, right? In the sense that the judge here, or in Eru in Middle Earth, can take such an evil and still turn it into something good in the end. And is this where people have a hard time understanding that no, he was actually a destructive character, even though there is this, like, you see a redemptive arc that wasn't, I don't know, was it not fulfilled? Or was he simply, I mean, to Tolkien, he was irredeemable. He is damnable, right? There's nothing you can do. He's been so corrupted by the ring that even that, right, in the end, that he couldn't get by that, no matter how much love he might have had for somebody.
Yeah, I can't help but connect it to that earlier paragraph in the Fuller letter that where he's commenting on the lead us not into temptation. He says, is the harder and the less often considered petition. And then he goes on to talk about how basically this is a situation where they're in temptation. The ring is the ultimate temptation, and once Gollum is given a chance for repentance, but once he fails at that, and you could say because of Sam's clumsiness or whatever, but once he fails, there wasn't any hope. And the macro good that was done was done despite Gollum's will. Gollum's will is now wholly given over to evil, and throughout, and multiple times, like he tries to get them killed by Shelob, but then he tries to kill them himself outside of Shelob's lair, and then he follows them in and tries to kill them again. And Sam has pity on him finally at the slopes of Mount Doom, and then he attacks Frodo and bites off his finger, and it's all evil. He's irredeemable. Iluvatar uses his evil for greater good, as Iluvatar does, but Gollum himself is pretty damnable at that point. Which, now, that kind of thing where there's this tension between paths of the path of damnation, the path of salvation for Gollum in this particular case, that, let me say this up front, let's because we started off talking about the Gollum game that's just come out. I haven't played it, but that would be something very interesting if I was forced against my will to make such a game, and I would have to be forced against my will to make such a game because I do not believe it worthy of game status to be sneaking around as Gollum for the whole entire game.
Parkour.
Sorry, parkour. Middle Earth parkour.
Every interview, so much Gollum parkour.
But if I had been forced, if someone had held me hostage and forced me to make such a game, then I would have gone down a path of giving the player characters basically a series of choices, which would lead ultimately to damnation or salvation. And now that I know that Tolkien feels free to reimagine a new story, I might have even done that, because and with the full knowledge that you're not doing Lord of the Rings anymore. But if you don't have that, if you don't have here's the damning thing. Speaking of damnation, here's the damnable thing about such a Gollum game of the kind that I haven't played. This game we know the ending, right? What about this game is inspiring? Like you're going to play a character that we know. Well, we know how it all ends with him. There's nothing to discover or nothing new to do with. Not only is he gross and unclothed and eats babies, but he's also a character that has no potential for anything different, or so we normally think about things.
Yeah.
So, but if I was forced to make the game, I would make it so that you actually could have a new story written. And for all the Tolkien purists out there like myself, I would throw letter 246 in their face that Jonathan just read and say Tolkien himself could have imagined a different ending to the story. So if you're going to play a game, why not do that? If you must play a game as Gollum.
Yeah, I'm much more forgiving of games in abandoning the lore of the Lord of the Rings, because they're flashes. They're flash in the pan. They come and go pretty quick. How much do people remember the games from 2001, 2002, 2003 for the Lord of the Rings movies that came out? Right, they don't stick around for very long. Whereas the films, the TV shows, they're on for a very long time. And so I feel like I lend very little weight to the lore of middle games. I'm forgiving. It better be, if I'm putting all this time into it, it better be fun rather than sticking completely to the lore. Although here's the thing, like you said, it's part of the problem even of like the Star Wars prequels is like we knew the character, we knew where he was going, so there was no mystery anymore. That's why the Return of the Jedi is so much more fulfilling because the redemption arc is complete, and it's fulfilled in such an emotional, vibrant way. Whereas in Revenge of the Sith, all you see is the evil come to fruition, and in the end, you knew that was coming, and so there's no big payoff. In this Gollum game, is it going to end? I think it's probably going to end when like Frodo finds the ring or something like that, or Bilbo finds the ring. I'm gonna guess. Or wait, does it happen between the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings?
No, it happens after that.
It does. It happens between
it's
the
Gollum's journey into Mordor and being captured
you're right. Sorry,
captured
this
again
is
by
how
the
much
elves.
I know. I've been trying to stay away from the game, so I come into it somewhat without a whole lot of reviews and other things.
And absolutely no doubt they're not going to stick to the lore. There's going to be all kinds of things they change and do differently. And again, with you, now here's an interesting point because you and I differ on this. So I did not like the Shadow of Mordor games, but you had mentioned to me you played them. So what was your impression and why did you like the thing that they were made?
Technically, I didn't consider them like Lord of the Rings games. Like they weren't like, oh, they're great, this is a Lord of the Rings style game. They were fine, they were fun, they were good. I enjoyed it mostly. And you know what, we're gonna talk about this more in our membership section, so we're gonna dive deep into the games that we've played, the games that we've liked, and if they're gonna make a Gollum game, what kind of game should have made instead. We talked about that a little bit. Maybe should I bring up that picture that we had of the game that we should have made. So if you want to become a member, go to theonering.com/member. You get access to our extended podcast and access to the extended podcast. You get access to our Discord chat. Hey, we're going to be putting up some merch real soon. I've got a fun one, Michael. I think you're going to like it at some point once I get to it. Oh yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
So we're going to be doing that. You get a discount on that once I finalize and put those all up. But the real game that should have been made that everybody actually wanted was this one, The Lord of the Rings Sam, because in the end, don't we really want to be like at the end? We want to be the like carrying Frodo up the mountain. Like this is the ultimate move that he has to make to be the hero. Is
exactly
I can carry you, Frodo, and he pulls him up the mountain, and then you see what happens at the end, and you get that redemption at the end. And hey, you could even go if they really want to do it. Imagine them going into the scouring of the Shire. Right, that would have been awesome.
Exactly.
And then, like you said later, we could have had him being the mayor, and we get the game Sam City.
That's right. We had some pretty amazing dad jokes in this live stream episode.
So if you wanna get the extended edition, we're gonna talk about that. Go to the onering.com/member and sign up free for the first month and $4 a month after that. Or if you really like Harrison and Adam and Linnea and Chuck, who are sponsors and they help us out even more at $20 a month, you can do that too. We'd really appreciate that. Yes. So the games. So let's jump into that. Let's go into our extended podcast. I think unless there's anything else we need to really like tell people about. Well, I'm going to be live streaming. I don't know how often I'm going to be live streaming.
Follow Jonathan's live stream. He'll get through one session at least. That's what we'll promise.
Dude, I spent money on getting the friggin' like Sindarin voiceover, which was an extra $10. So 2.5 members cost the Sindarin voiceover per this month.
Oh, you know what we should do? We haven't announced it yet, so I won't be specific. But we should play some of the Sindarin voiceovers for an upcoming guest of ours that may or may not have something to do with Elvish translations.
There you go, man. So I'm going to be playing that. We'll see how that goes. If it sucks, I'm going to stop. I'm sorry. There's no money that it's worth maybe there is.
And guys, since it will suck, I'm not even going to start. But I am going to watch Jonathan.
It would be funny actually. Like if you could jump on the live stream at the same time and you could be there, we could comment together as I'm playing.
I'll do it. Right. Just send me the time.
All right, we'll figure that out. Hey, there was okay. Is there anything else to say about Gollum? I mean, he's a complex character. He's just not a big bad, and he has this arc of like where he approaches goodness. Goodness is not the word. Where he approaches what being a hobbit like character was like, where he starts understanding love, or he had love for Frodo, but in the end, the destruction that the ring wrought in him is just impossible to overcome.
Here's my final thought.
Yeah.
Gollum has always fascinated me as a character because as a tremendous absorber of much fantasy and much sci-fi in my youth, less so in the later years as I've been having amazing numbers of children. The character of Gollum is fairly unique. There are very few, if any, authors who write characters that are so non-archetypal. Gollum has a non-archetypal quality to him, where we as the reader are invited to both hate him and pity him, to feel sorry for him, even empathize sometimes with him, and be disgusted by him. He's a very interesting character. And I would point out again, one that Tolkien himself clearly had a lot of sentimental love for because of his reaction to Gollum's near repentance on the stair of Cirith Ungol. So he's a fascinating character, not worth making a whole video game out of, but as a character in a book, he's fantastic. And
clearly Tolkien. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Worth contemplation. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and clearly Tolkien kept contemplating him far after it was published too.
Right.
He was the character that intrigued him the most. I mean, even in, let's see, letter number 70 in 1944, he did write, I think this was to his son, Gollum continues to develop into a most intriguing character. So even then, relatively early, 10 years before it was published, I can't remember, 52, I think, 53. Anyway, many years before it was published, like Gollum was intriguing him then, and it only grew. Like Gollum kept coming up in his story as not a cut and dried character. Last question for you then, before we jump into the members' podcast, is how do you think they performed that? Do you think it was well done in the films, in Peter Jackson's films, how Gollum was portrayed, being, dual personality completely?
I do. I think Sarkis did a fantastic job of acting it. I liked the way the dialogue was written, the cut scenes in the Smeagol versus Gollum dialogue, which actually brings to life something which was clearly in Tolkien's text, but which many of my first readings I did not catch that kind of bipolar, schizophrenic nature of things. And they did it, visually speaking, I thought that was excellent. Sarkis did a great job. They changed a lot of things, so there's some quibbles I have with some moments of Gollum. But yeah, I did think he was actually very well done. And CGI wise, he remains better than like 98% of the movies made today, and from a 20-year ago CGI. So it's stunning.
My kids had a heart when we watched it a month ago. All three movies, all three extended editions, from 6 years old to 12 years old. My kids were like, he wasn't real. Like, how did they do that? Like, he came across like as not fake at all to them. And that says a lot. Not just because it looked good, but because of how he was portrayed as a Smeagol Gollum. And the kids, even the youngest kids, got it right away. They understood that he's a conflicted character between the two of them, and that is harder to pick up. In extended prose, it's a lot easier to portray that on film. So I have no problems with Gollum at all. I still have problems with Galadriel and Aragorn and Faramir. Gollum,
Faramir especially. Maybe the last thought I will leave then is it just struck me as you were saying that about your kids' reaction, because recently, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, I reread On Fairy Stories with my teenagers, who were my high schoolers who had it for a class of theirs in their high school, and I was reminded by Tolkien's insistence in On Fairy Stories that it is a shame that we relegate fairy stories to children's literature, because by doing so we actually dumb down fairy stories. And when not that children can't have profit from fairy stories told at their level, but that actually fairy stories serve a higher purpose in human culture and civilization, and that we should write fairy stories for adults, which clearly, obviously, he did with Lord of the Rings. And to that point, I would just say, connect the Gollum character, and I would say, Gollum, there are things that kids will get about Gollum, but the deeper contemplation of the character of Gollum, of the mercy of Bilbo, the mercy of Frodo, the mercy in the end of Sam on the slopes of Mount Doom, and Gollum's conflicted nature is something that is actually quite adult in its understanding, like the forgive those who trespass against you, for example, and Gollum deserving not to live. This idea of what justice and just deserts are about, as Gandalf comments on earlier in the book. So these are actually very deep ideas that are well beyond the understanding of kids, and that adults would do well to focus on too. So.
Yeah, and actually, just on Twitter the other day, my quote tweet was, and this is a little bit more specific, but it says it points to the same thing: is that you don't write down to kids, you don't make fairy stories something childish. Tolkien wrote in April 1959, "A good vocabulary is not acquired by reading books written according to some notion of the vocabulary of one's age group. It comes from reading books above one." So even in just vocabulary, right? Don't settle for kids. Like when we talk to our little kids, I don't dumb things down for them. If they don't understand the word, I'll be like, "Do you get that?" And I'll explain it to them because they've got to improve. So yeah.
Yep. Remember those old 1950s Dick and Jane books? I always hated that. I was like, this is so stupid. Like, how about you read?
I know.
Like I understand kids are simple and they don't understand. But let's read to them something above their level so that they stretch.
Right. If they're reading it on their own, that's one thing. If I'm reading to them, or if they're experiencing something, let them experience something that's going to improve them rather than bring it down to a level of,
well said.
The Little Mermaid.
That's funny. You were thinking that too, huh? Imagine that.
Had to bring it up. All right. So lastly,
if you like Tolkien,
you can follow my live stream. And I think we're going to be doing our free live streams, as if it would charge anybody for them. We're going to be doing our Fellowship Fridays. We're going to change it up a little bit. We're probably looking at the evening. We're gonna, what's so funny?
That was so low-key depressed. Like, you follow my live stream. Like the whole vocal fry drop off there. So fantastic.
Hey, man. You know what? It can't be worse than the stuff I had going on at my real day job this week with some major things. And anyway, but yeah, we'll follow the live stream. Fellowship Fridays live. We're going to be doing it bi-weekly every other week. That's the goal. Probably in the evenings. Rather than during the day, so that we can get the best cross-section of people at the best times.
And if you made it this far, definitely listen to those live streams, because they're fantastic. You get to hear lots of people from different angles on the Tolkien world. We have plenty of disagreement and fun debates, and some good and laughs at the silliness of modern takes on Tolkien as well.
Which it's just not slowing down. We're getting more and more and more. We're going to be here a long time.
Clicks forever.
So if you wanna be here a long time too, then join our extended podcast by going to theonering.com/member. Become a member, $4 a month. First month is free. But we're going to jump into the extended podcast and talk more about games. Talk more about what game we might make if we were given $1 billion for Amazon, because they're also making a massively multiplayer online game. I don't know if we left out the RPG part of it, but we'll go into that, and then we'll talk about what games we've played too. So join us there. See you on the other side.